They said wild Mustangs never trusted humans. They said they were ghosts of the prairie, born of wind and lightning, and would sooner die than bend to a human's will. But when Ranger Claire Donovan finished her patrol in the Wyoming woods, one mare refused to let her go. It just stood there, blocking the path, its eyes burning with a message Claire couldn't understand. Step by step, it followed her when she tried to leave, circling back with an urgency that wasn't about food or fear. What Claire discovered when she finally gave in and followed the wild horse into the deep, dark woods was something no training could ever prepare her for. It was a secret the forest had been keeping, and it would bring her to her knees. The day had been quiet. Too quiet. 12 years as a ranger in the Big Horn Mountains had taught Claire that silence wasn't peace. It was a held breath. As the sun bled out behind the peaks, casting long cage bar shadows across the trail, the forest went dead still. No birds, no insects, not even the whisper of wind in the pines. Claire's hand instinctively went to the radio on her belt. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was the kind of quiet that came before a predator's strike. She scanned the tree line, her eyes straining in the dying light, and then a shape stepped out of the shadows. It wasn't a bear or a cougar, it was a horse. A wild Mustang, its coat thick with the dust of the backcountry, its mane a tangled mess. Wild horses were phantoms here. You saw them from a mile away, a shimmer on the horizon, and then they were gone. But this one didn't run. It stood directly in her path, broad-shouldered and defiant, and stared right at her. The air crackled. The mare's gaze was intense, unblinking. It wasn't the look of a curious animal, it was a demand. Claire froze, every nerve screaming. Protocol was clear: don't engage, maintain distance, report. But her feet felt rooted to the earth. She could see the rise and fall of the mare's powerful chest, the intelligence burning in its dark eyes. This was wrong, all wrong. "Easy, girl," Claire murmured, her voice a dry rasp. The words were for herself as much as the horse. The mare flicked an ear, then it did something impossible. It let out a soft, trembling whinny. Not a challenge, not a threat. It sounded almost fragile, pleading. Claire's brow furrowed. What was happening? The mare stamped its hoof twice, kicking up a puff of dust. It took a few steps away from her, deeper down the trail, then stopped and looked back. Its eyes locked on hers again, sharp and insistent. It was a question, an invitation. Claire stood stunned, her mind reeling. Wild horses don't do this. They don't communicate with people. They run. But the mare did it again. Another soft, pleading nicker, another look over its shoulder. It was waiting. For her. The world seemed to shrink to the space between them. The forest, the fading sun, her duty. It all dissolved. There was only this wild creature, breaking every rule of its nature, begging her to understand something without words. Claire's training screamed at her to back away, to call it in, to let the wild be wild. But a deeper instinct, something ancient and primal, was stirring in her gut. This wasn't random. This wasn't a fluke. This mare needed something, desperately. The mare stamped a third time, more urgently now, and took 2 more steps into the growing darkness. It glanced back, eyes flashing in the gloom, a silent command. "Follow me." Claire's heart was a drum against her ribs. The horse wasn't lost. It wasn't cornered. It was leading. It was recruiting her. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered to the empty air. The mare gave one last urgent cry, a sound that cut through Claire's doubts like a knife. And then it just stood there, tense and waiting, its entire being focused on one thing: Claire's choice. Her hand hovered over her radio, her thumb on the transmit button. How could she possibly explain this? "Dispatch, I've got a Mustang here. She wants me to follow her." They'd think she'd lost her mind. They'd tell her to stand down, to wait for backup that might not come until morning. She could hear her old instructor's voice in her head, a gravelly warning: never engage alone, never trust a wild animal. But then she heard the mare's soft whinny again, and the rules in her head went silent. That sound wasn't just an animal noise. It was the sound of desperation. There was purpose in this, and Claire felt it wrap around her, pulling her in. She lowered her hand from the radio. All right, she breathed, the word a puff of white in the cold air. The mare's ears shot forward. Claire clicked on her flashlight, a bright golden beam slicing through the purple twilight. She took a step, then another. Okay, she said, her voice stronger now, a promise to the horse and to herself. Show me. The mare didn't wait for another invitation. It turned and trotted into the shadows, its dark shape a beacon in the gloom. And Claire, leaving all logic and training behind, followed. The forest swallowed them whole. The familiar trail twisted and warped in the narrow beam of her flashlight. The mare kept a steady pace about 20 yards ahead, just far enough to make Claire commit. Every few minutes it would pause, turn its head, and its eyes would catch the light, gleaming like twin embers in the dark. The look was always the same. Are you still with me? Keep up. Claire's pulse throbbed in time with her footsteps. I'm here, she'd murmur, the sound swallowed by the oppressive silence. A nervous laugh escaped her lips. This is insane, she said to a towering pine. I'm following a horse into the woods after dark. The deeper they went, the darker it got. The canopy of leaves overhead became a thick black roof, blotting out the last of the sky. The air grew heavy, damp and cold, and the silence, it was absolute. The usual nighttime chorus of insects and frogs was gone. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath, watching her. Claire's flashlight beam danced over gnarled roots that looked like skeletal fingers clawing their way out of the earth. Shadows writhed and twisted at the edge of the light, playing tricks on her eyes. Every instinct told her to turn back, to run to the safety of the ranger station. But her feet kept moving, pulled by an invisible thread. This wasn't just a random path, the mare was moving with unshakable purpose. It knew exactly where it was going. But where? A sliver of fear, cold and sharp, slid down her spine. Animals could be unpredictable. They could lead you into danger, a trap, a predator's den. She remembered all the rescues she'd done, an elk caught in a fence, a bear cub in a snare. Animals in trouble sometimes sought help, but never ever like this. Never with such clear, intelligent intent. The mare's soft whinny echoed back through the trees, and Claire's resolve hardened. You need something, she whispered. You wouldn't be here otherwise. A strange mix of fear and excitement surged through her. She was on the edge of a discovery. She could feel it. The minutes stretched into an eternity. She realized with a jolt that she could no longer hear the creek that always ran parallel to this trail. The forest felt empty, vacant. Suddenly the mare stopped dead. Its body went rigid, its head high, ears pricked forward. The urgency coming off it was a physical force, a wave of pure, uncut panic. Claire's skin erupted in goosebumps. The mare wasn't just waiting anymore. It was pleading. The air grew thick, heavy, making it hard to breathe. The trail ahead narrowed, plunging into a tunnel of shadow so complete it felt like walking into a cave. Claire's hand trembled, the flashlight beam shaking. And then the mare bolted. Its hooves thundered on the packed earth, no longer guiding, but fleeing toward something. It glanced back once, its eyes wild in the bobbing light, and then plunged forward. Wait, Claire gasped, breaking into a clumsy run. Branches whipped at her face, and thorns tore at her jacket. The forest floor was a minefield of roots and rocks, but she didn't slow down. She couldn't. Because now, cutting through the silence, she heard it too. It was a faint sound at first, a thin, high-pitched noise, like cloth tearing in slow motion. She thought it was the wind. But the sound came again, clearer this time. It was a rasping, broken cry. It wasn't the wind. It was alive. And it was in pain. Claire's blood ran cold. The sound was raw, desperate, and it twisted something deep in her gut. The mare heard it too, and let out a piercing scream that was half terror, half rallying cry. It crashed through the undergrowth, its powerful body a blur of motion. Claire just ran, her lungs burning, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The broken cries grew louder, sharper, pulling them forward. Oh God, what am I about to find? The thought flashed through her mind, but there was no time to think. There was only the sound, and the desperate need to get to it. They burst into a small, sunken clearing. An old creek bed had eroded into a deep, jagged pit of thick black mud. Claire skidded to a stop at the edge, her flashlight beam sweeping down into the hollow, and her breath hitched in her throat. There, at the bottom of the pit, was a foal. It was small, barely a few months old, its pale coat caked in a thick layer of suffocating muck. Its hind legs were tangled in a brutal snarl of exposed roots, trapping it in the mire. The mud was like quicksand, sucking it down. The foal's tiny chest heaved in shallow, ragged bursts. Its eyes, wide and glassy with exhaustion, stared up at nothing. It tried to kick, a feeble, sluggish movement, before collapsing again with a strangled whimper. That was the sound she had heard, a baby fighting for its last breath. Claire's heart seized. The mare screamed from the rim of the pit, a sound of pure agony and fury. She reared, her hooves pounding the earth, then dropped her head, her muzzle straining toward her trapped baby. Her entire body trembled. The foal answered with a pitiful, broken cry, and the mare's answering whinny was choked with a helplessness that tore Claire apart. The image burned itself into her brain, a mother forced to watch her child suffocate, powerless to help. And then she understood. The strange journey, the silent plea, the impossible trust. This wild creature had sought out its natural enemy, a human, as its very last hope. The foal's breathing grew weaker, a rattling, shallow sound in the night. It tried to lift its head, but the thick mud dragged it back down. "Don't you give up," Claire whispered, the words cracking. "Hold on, please, just hold on." The mare's hooves drummed a frantic rhythm on the dirt. She pawed at the ground, her eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. She lowered her head, nuzzling the air just above the pit, and let out a cry of pure, piercing grief. And then those eyes found Claire's. In the beam of the flashlight, they shone with a terrifying clarity. The fear was gone. The wildness was gone. All that was left was desperation, surrender, and impossibly trust. The weight of that look hit Claire like a physical blow. This creature of instinct was choosing to defy it, to stand her ground and put the fate of her baby in the hands of a human. A stranger, a potential predator. A chill raced down Claire's spine, but it was followed by a fire that burned in her chest. She fell to her knees at the edge of the pit, the cold mud soaking through her pants. The flashlight trembled in her hand, the beam dancing over the foal's shuddering body. Its head was sinking lower. "No, no, no," she muttered, panic clawing at her throat. "Not yet. Don't you quit on me." The mare stood over her, a silent, desperate statue. And in that moment, the boundary between their worlds, human and wild, ranger and Mustang, crumbled into dust. A tear cut a clean path through the grime on Claire's cheek. "You came for me," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "You brought me here." Her voice broke. "You're trusting me. To save your baby." The mare whinnied softly, a rough, pained sound that was a clear and unmistakable yes. Claire's chest felt like it was being crushed. Every step the mare had taken, every backward glance, had been a desperate gamble, a plea to the one creature she should have run from. And now Claire was the only one who could answer. Her eyes darted between the dying foal and the pleading mother. The foal had only minutes, maybe seconds, left. Her hand fumbled for her radio. She pressed the transmit button, her voice sharp with an urgency she didn't try to hide. "Forest Dispatch, this is Donovan. I've got an emergency, foal trapped in a mud pit, critical condition." Static hissed back. Then a calm voice crackled through the speaker. "Copy that, Donovan. Closest unit is at least 2 hours out. Hold your position." 2 hours. The words slammed into her like a physical blow. She lowered the radio, her hand shaking. 2 hours was a death sentence. The foal was sinking, its breaths becoming faint, fluttery things. It didn't have minutes, let alone hours. Claire stared down into the pit. The foal's eyelids were closed now, heavy with an exhaustion it couldn't fight anymore. It kicked once, a final pitiful spasm, and the mud sucked it down another inch. The sound that came from its throat was the last whisper of a life giving up. Claire's stomach churned. Her training screamed at her. "Wait for backup. Do not enter an unstable hazard. Protect yourself first." But if she waited, that foal would die. She didn't need 2 hours to know it. She didn't need 2 minutes. The mare paced frantically at the edge of the pit, her hooves striking the ground in a desperate rhythm. She dipped her head, her muzzle almost touching the mud, and let out a guttural cry that trembled with grief. Then her eyes, wet and shimmering in the flashlight beam, locked onto Claire's again. And what Claire saw in them shattered her resolve. It was the raw, unadorned hope of a mother with nothing left. The forest seemed to close in, funneling all the darkness and silence and fear into that one look. Her thoughts were a panicked whirlwind. I can't. It's too dangerous. The ground is unstable. If I go in there, I'll get stuck too. But the images of a dozen other rescues flashed through her mind. The bear cub in the snare, the fawn at the fence line. Each time she had acted, each time she had saved a life that would have been lost. But never like this. Never with a wild mother standing guard, her trust a heavy weight on Claire's shoulders. She closed her eyes, pressing the heel of her hand against her forehead. God, what do I do? A single tear slid hot down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She opened her eyes, met the mare's gaze, and the decision was made. All right, girl, she said, her voice low and trembling. I'll try. The words hung in the air, a fragile vow. The mare answered with a short, sharp whinny, not of panic, but of acknowledgement. As if the wild itself had just accepted her promise, Claire's body moved before her mind could protest. She stripped off her gloves, her jacket, rolling up her sleeves to the elbow. She scanned the edge of the pit, her flashlight beam finding a spot where the slope was less steep, held together by a thick web of roots. She clipped the light to a harness on her chest, freeing her hands. She took a deep breath, dug her boots into the earth, and looked at the mare one last time. The Mustang stood motionless, her eyes burning with a desperate fire. Okay, Claire said aloud, sealing the pact. We're doing this. There was no turning back now. The ground gave way with her first step. Cold, thick mud sucked at her boot, climbing instantly to her knee. Every movement was like wading through wet concrete. The flashlight on her chest cast a jittery beam across the pit, landing on the foal's mud-streaked face. Its eyes were cloudy, blinking in slow, weak tremors. I'm here. Hold on, she whispered, her voice swallowed by the sucking sound of the mud. Her next step slid, and she pitched sideways, catching herself on a gnarled root that jutted from the pit wall. She clung to it, her knuckles white, and pulled herself forward. The cold was a living thing, seeping into her bones. The foal sensed her approach and thrashed weakly, spattering her face with gritty mud. Its movements were frantic, desperate, and with each kick, the mud pulled it deeper. Easy, Claire breathed, holding her hands up in a gesture of peace. I'm not going to hurt you. The foal let out a tiny, papery squeal that died on the surface of the pit. It wasn't a sound of fear. It was a sound of pure need. Above them, the mare stamped her hooves in a tight, clipped rhythm, a drumbeat of anxiety. She didn't charge. She didn't try to follow. Somehow she understood that one wrong move could doom them all. But her eyes never left Claire's hands. Claire waded another step, the mud now at her thighs, chilling her muscles until they burned. Her light found the source of the trap. The foal's hind legs were caught in a brutal cage of roots, woven so tightly around its ankles that they looked like they were part of its body. When she reached down and tested the thickest root, it was as solid as iron. Okay, she said to herself, her voice a low growl of determination. We start small. She knelt, and the mud surged over her knees, the cold a shocking jolt. She slid her fingers into the tangle, found a thinner strand, and pulled. It snapped with a soft, fibrous pop. The foal flinched and cried out. I know it hurts, Claire said, her own voice breaking. She began to clear the silt away with her bare hands, scooping handfuls of the heavy muck away from the foal's trapped legs. Every few seconds, she had to stop and wipe the mud from her eyes with the back of her wrist. The foal's breathing was a quick, shallow pant. When its eyes drifted closed, Claire gently brushed its neck. Stay with me, she coaxed. Stay with me. Root by root, she worked at the smaller strands, prying them loose. But the main root was sunk deep, pulled taut by the foal's struggles. She wrapped her fingers around it and pulled with all her might. It didn't budge. Sweat dripped into her eyes, stinging even as the cold of the mud leached the strength from her legs. Above, the mare's drumming grew faster, more frantic. "I've got her," Claire called up, her voice strained. "I've got her." She shifted her footing, and one boot slid on a patch of slick clay. She caught herself on the root again, a sharp gasp punching from her lungs. "Come on," she hissed at the stubborn wood, at the unyielding earth. She worked a hand underneath the main root, digging with her fingers until they were raw, grit biting under her nails. The foal gave a sudden, weak heave, and the root cinched even tighter, drawing a cry of pain so thin it barely existed. "Almost," Claire panted, changing her strategy. She started clearing a channel around the root, scooping away the mud to expose it. With every handful she removed, more mud would slurp back into its place, trying to reclaim the space she had stolen. Time was running out. She braced both hands on the big root, planted her feet as best she could, and leaned back with her entire body weight. Her arms trembled. The root groaned but held fast. She tried again, pulling down instead of up. Nothing. Her biceps screamed in protest. The foal's tiny body trembled, and it let out another whisper-thin cry before kicking once, a kick as weak as a falling leaf. "Come on!" The word tore out of her, a raw, ragged shout of frustration. She hauled on the root, her teeth gritted, her jaw aching. The root creaked. A fine stream of bubbles rose from the mud around it. She dragged harder, her legs shaking. Suddenly, her boot slipped again, and her knee plunged deep, cold liquid rushing into her boot. She caught herself with an elbow, reset her grip, and hauled with a final desperate surge of adrenaline. Something gave. Not the whole root, just a section of it, but it was enough. The pressure changed. She seized the opportunity, twisting the loosened root, levering it back and forth. A smaller strand snapped, then another. The whole knot loosened. The foal's hind leg slid free a few inches. A sob of relief caught in Claire's throat. "Almost there," she gasped. "Almost." She worked faster now, her knuckles scraped raw, ignoring the sting of cold mud in the open wounds. She ripped the last few fibers away from the foal's ankles. "Okay," she panted, blinking grit from her eyes. "Okay, you're free." The foal let out a sound so small it was almost a sigh. Its freed legs quivered and then collapsed, spent. Its head slumped against Claire's shoulder, the touch of its warm, living body a shock through the cold mud. Above them, the mare threw back her head and sent a ringing, triumphant call into the night, a sound of pure, unadulterated hope that hurt to hear. Claire closed her eyes for a single heartbeat, letting the relief wash over her. But she knew they weren't done. The foal's chest was still rising and falling in faint, shallow movements. It was free, but it was still dying. "Stay with me," she whispered, and looped her arm under the foal's neck. It was heavier than it looked, the mud adding a dead weight that made lifting it a monumental task. She planted her feet and tried to stand. The suction of the mud fought her, trying to pull them both back down. The foal was a dead weight, a sodden blanket across her shoulders. Its breath was a faint buzz against her collarbone. "Don't you give up now," she murmured, as much to herself as to the foal. She planted one foot higher on the slope and pushed. Her boot stuck fast, and she had to wrench it free with a twist that sent a jolt of pain through her hip. Every step was a battle. She clawed her way up the slick wall of the pit, her muscles screaming, her lungs on fire. The mare danced along the rim above them, matching her progress step for step, her eyes blazing. Halfway up, Claire's knee slammed into a submerged rock. Pain, white-hot and sharp, shot up her leg. She hissed through her teeth and clawed for a handhold, her fingers slipping on the slick clay before finally catching a root. The foal slid an inch, then two. She hauled it back, grunting with the effort, her forehead pressed against its muddy neck. "You're okay," she said, her eyes squeezed shut. "We're almost there." The last few feet felt like miles. Her arms shook, her vision swam with black spots. At last, her knee found the solid ground of the rim. She shoved herself forward and tumbled onto the bank, the foal spilling gently beside her. She rolled onto her hands and knees, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mare was there in an instant, her muzzle nudging her baby, her lips fluttering against its mud-caked cheek in frantic, tender bursts. A low, trembling sound poured from the mare's throat, a sound of overwhelming love and relief. "It's okay," Claire croaked, her voice shredded. "She's out." The foal lay on its side, its chest rising and falling in a thin, stuttering rhythm. The mare began to lick it clean, her tongue working methodically, as if she could erase the entire ordeal. Then she lifted her head and met Claire's gaze. In that single silent look, 1,000 things were said. Gratitude, relief, a bond forged in mud and terror. Claire felt something inside her break. She sank to her knees in the dirt, the exhaustion hitting her like a wave. Tears she didn't know she was holding back cut clean paths through the grime on her face. "You trusted me," she whispered, the words cracked and wet. The mare blinked slowly, as if sealing the truth between them. Claire wiped her face with a filthy sleeve and turned her attention back to the foal. It was alive, but its breath was still a fragile thing. She knew what she had to do next. She reached for her pack, her movements slow and deliberate. Her promise to the mare hung in the air, a silent vow laid between the three of them in the heart of the dark forest. "I'll get you both through this," she said, her voice finding a new strength. Somehow, Claire ripped open an orange emergency pack with her teeth and shook out the crinkling silver thermal blanket. She spread it over the foal's shivering body, the foil flashing in the beam of her chest light. She folded a corner back and used her own sleeve to wipe the thickest mud from the foal's chest and belly, trying to clear a space for warmth to get in. The foal twitched, and one eye cracked open, a dim, tired spark, before drifting shut again. "Stay with us, little one," Claire urged, her voice low and steady. She slid a hand up its damp neck and found the pulse. It was thready and fast, but it was there. She tucked the blanket in tight, creating a silver cocoon, and then slid her pack under its head to clear its airway. The faint wheezing sound softened. "Good," she breathed. "That's good." The mare hovered over them, so close Claire could feel the heat radiating from her body. Her breath fell in soft white veils over Claire's shoulder. Claire didn't move. She just met the mare's eyes. "I've got her," she whispered. "I'm not letting go." She grabbed her radio again. "Donovan to dispatch," she said, her voice tight. "Foal is out, but critical. Hypothermic. I need the fastest ETA on vet rescue." The static crackled. "Copy, Donovan. Rescue truck with vet Rachel Morgan is en route. ETA 30 minutes. 30 minutes. It felt like a lifetime, but it was survivable. "Please," Claire whispered to the sky, "let it be enough." She returned to the foal, her palm resting on its ribs, counting the breaths. 1, 2, pause, 1, pause. The next half hour was a blur of focused, repetitive tasks. Count the breaths, check the pulse, rub the foal's chest to generate friction and warmth, shield its small body from the cold night air with her own. Every time the foal's breathing faltered, she would whisper to it, a constant low murmur of encouragement. "Stay awake. You're not done yet. Come on, fight." The mare stood sentinel, a silent partner in the vigil. At one point she rested her chin lightly on Claire's shoulder, a gesture of shared purpose so profound it made Claire's throat tighten. They were a team, two mothers from different worlds, united by the fragile, flickering life between them. A memory surfaced, sharp and unwanted. A small, stunned robin she'd found as a child, its tiny heart beating against her palms. She had whispered to it, begged it to live, but it had gone still anyway. The old ache flared in her chest. "Not again," she thought fiercely. "Not tonight." "Do you hear me?" she said aloud, her voice quiet but iron hard. "Not tonight." Finally, a sound cut through the woods, the low growl of an engine. Headlights pulsed between the trees, growing brighter, sweeping across the clearing and washing their small, desperate scene in harsh white light. A truck skidded to a stop, and two figures in reflective jackets jumped out, carrying a canvas stretcher. A third followed, a woman with a determined look and a large medical bag. "Rachel," Claire called, her voice breaking on the name. The vet, Rachel Morgan, didn't waste a second. She was on her knees, a penlight in her teeth, her gloved hands assessing the foal with brisk efficiency. "Severe hypothermia, exhaustion," she said, her tone clipped and professional. "We need to move her. Now." The two rescuers positioned the stretcher. Careful with the hind legs, Claire said quickly. They were tangled in roots. Got it, one of them replied. On three, Rachel said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted the foal in one smooth motion. The tiny animal let out a paper-thin squeal, and the mare exploded. She reared with a ringing, furious scream, her hooves crashing down just inches from the rescuers. They flinched back, startled. Without thinking, Claire stepped between them, her hand held up flat towards the mare. Easy, girl, she said, her voice calm but firm. We're helping her. It's okay. Easy. The mare froze, her eyes wild, her body trembling on a knife's edge. She blew out a sharp breath, then another, and slowly, inch by inch, she backed away, her gaze never leaving her foal. They slid the stretcher up a ramp into the back of the truck. Rachel was already inside, tearing open IV bags. At the tailgate, she turned, her face lit by a headlamp. She wouldn't have made it without you, Claire, she said, the words plain and true. Claire couldn't answer. A knot of emotion was lodged in her throat. She just nodded, feeling fresh tears carve new paths through the dried mud on her face. We'll keep them together, Rachel said. She'll be calmer if her mother is close. Claire looked at the mare. Come on, she said softly. We're going with her. The mare stepped onto the ramp, stretched her neck, and blew a warm, soft breath over her baby's face. Then she stepped back, allowing them to close the doors. The engine roared to life. Claire placed a muddy hand on the cool metal, feeling the vibration, the promise of warmth and medicine and life. Let's go, she whispered to the darkness. We're not done yet. The treatment barn was a haven of golden light and warm hay. For days, the foal lay in a special stall, swaddled in blankets, a slow drip of fluids feeding life back into her fragile body. She was shaky at first, but each day she grew stronger. And through it all, her mother stood guard just outside the stall door, a silent, unmoving sentinel. She watched every move the vets made, her nostrils flaring, her ears twitching, judging their every action. She only relaxed when Claire was near. Claire came every day, leaving her muddy boots at the door. The first time she entered, the mare tensed, caution flaring in her eyes. It's me, Claire said softly, holding out her empty hands. The mare's posture softened. She dipped her head in a gesture of recognition, of acceptance, and touched her muzzle to Claire's outstretched fingers. In the quiet of the barn, a new language was being learned, one of soft touches and softer breaths. On the third day, the foal took 2 wobbly steps. On the fourth, she attempted a tiny trot and tumbled head-first into a pile of clean straw. Claire laughed, a real full-throated laugh, and the mare nudged her clumsy baby back onto her feet. You're getting stronger, Claire murmured, watching them. A bond was forming between the three of them, a strange, unlikely family born of a desperate night. She decided you were one of the herd, Rachel said one evening, watching them from the doorway. I decided the same, Claire answered, and was surprised by how true the words felt. Then came the day they were ready. Time to go home, Rachel said, her voice gentle. They led them out into the late afternoon sun. The world smelled of pine and thawing earth. In the distance, across the rolling hills, their herd was waiting. The mare lifted her head, her nostrils flaring, and let out a long, clear call. An answer came back on the wind, a ripple of sound from a dozen other horses. The foal pranced at her mother's side, a mixture of excitement and fear. A ranger swung the gate to the open range wide. They walked slowly at first, then faster, the call of the herd pulling them forward. Claire walked beside them, a silent escort. When they reached the herd, there was a flurry of soft nickers and gentle nuzzles. The other horses closed around the mother and child, welcoming them back into the fold. Claire stopped at the fence line, her palm resting on the warm wood, and watched them go. She felt a profound ache in her chest, a mix of joy and sadness. Just as the herd began to move away, the mare stopped. She turned her head and looked back right at Claire. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. It was a simple, quiet acknowledgement. A thank you, a goodbye. Their gazes locked across the field, and in that moment Claire understood. A tear slid down her cheek, then another. You're welcome, she whispered, her voice thick. The mare flicked her ears, then turned and disappeared into the moving river of horses, her foal tucked safely at her side. Claire stayed at that fence until the last of them had vanished over the horizon, until the sun had set the whole sky on fire. She sank to her knees in the dirt, the tension of the last week finally releasing its grip. Even the wildest hearts can learn to trust, she thought, when love is stronger than fear. The words felt like a truth the land itself had whispered to her. On the drive back to the station, the world looked different, sharper, more beautiful. She caught her reflection in the truck's window, tired, smudged, but with a new light in her eyes. The faint scars on her knuckles were a reminder of what she had done, of where she was supposed to be. It wasn't just about the rescue. It was about the moment a boundary between two worlds had dissolved, when a wild mind and a human one had met in a place beyond fear. It was a moment of trust, a permission to help and be helped. And that knowledge settled deep inside her, a new center of gravity. That night, standing outside her small cabin, she listened to the sounds of the forest, no longer hearing silence, but the busy, secret life of a world that, on its best days, trusted her back. Thank you for staying with us for this incredible journey. What was your favorite part of Claire's story? Let us know in the comments below. If this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with a friend, and subscribe to the channel for more unforgettable tales. And make sure you ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means the world to us.